Should be all set.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela. And can we please start with roll call?
Yep.
Thank you.
Lauren, you're all set.
Okay. Chair Underwood,
I'm here. Thank you.
Vice Chair Drix,
Present.
Catherine Van Amber,
Present.
Priscilla de la Cruz,
Present.
Carlos Garcia Quijano,
Here.
Jesus Alwin,
Present.
Amelia Rose,
Present.
Bada Kumba, absent. You have 7 present, 1 absent. You have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren.
You're welcome.
And I'm so excited to see you all for our May Environmental Sustainability Task Force meeting, which might actually be our last ever Environmental Sustainability Task Force meeting when we become soon the Sustainability Commission. So very excited for that. We have a guest today, so I'm going to take our agenda a little bit out of order so we can respect John's time. But we have John from GrowSmart here with us today to talk about Kennedy Plaza. I think Dwayne is from South Providence Neighborhood Association will be joining as well. Just checking my email to make sure he isn't having trouble with the link. But I will let John introduce himself, but we had an interest in our last meeting. I think it was Catherine who brought it up and maybe Liza Birkin around talking in this forum about what's going on in Kennedy Plaza. And so John at GrowSmart has been at the center of a lot of this work and agreed to come share with us what they've been working on. So I will stop talking and let John introduce himself. And I'll say one last thing, which is if Angela or Lauren could give me screen sharing abilities, John has a website, I think, that I might share if he asks me to. So, and then I can send it to you guys as well. So it can get posted in the notes.
You're all set.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Take it away, John.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks to all of you for expressing interest in this subject. And so my name is John Flaherty. I'm with GrowSmart Rhode Island. GrowSmart has long been involved in transit advocacy, also land use, and the intersection of all these issues of economic development and housing and transportation and so forth. And we've taken a real interest in the proposals for remaking Kennedy Plaza yet again, and actually this time largely dismantling the state's central transit hub there. So I'll give you a little bit an overview of what has happened to date and sort of where things we think are going. There's been something of a breakthrough that occurred last month that we're pleased by. But in general, the concern that we have about dismantling the state central bus hub is that the bus stops and the transfer points would be scattered from what is now in a very concentrated location, which is convenient for a lot of folks, to several places throughout downtown. And what we think is going to happen is it's going to mean more transfers for people, more waiting for buses, more waiting in places that don't have cover from the elements, just not a very inviting environment for people who use transit, and just making trips longer and just adding to the hassle of people who rely upon transit to get about their daily life. And so we've been opponents of what RIDOT refers to as its multi-hub plan, which is the thing that would split it up among many locations. And so this is going on 7 years now since voters approved a $35 million bond in 2014 to improve transit hub infrastructure throughout the state. Really, it was pitched when it was being sold to voters as a plan to create a multimodal transportation hub at the train station in Providence. That was a plan that had been fairly vetted by the public, and but RIDOT walked away from that because they believed that there was insufficient private sector interest in a P3 approach. I'm not sure if that's completely accurate, but that was the reason that they had walked away from it. But here we are 7 years later, almost 7 years later, and the only thing that we have to show for this bond campaign, this bond issuance is about $1.2 million spent on legal and consulting fees. Pretty much no progress on improving the transit infrastructure. And the one other thing that I want to point out that's really important is that you may have heard about the state's transit master plan, first ever for Rhode Island. We also have a bike mobility plan, both of which got enacted in December of 2020. This proposal for a multi-hub plan was not conceived as part of the process of developing that transit master plan, which had an enormous amount of public engagement. This multi-hub proposal had zero public engagement. Transit riders did not have a seat at the table. They were not involved in the scoping or the development of the plan. And so it's not shocking that transit riders who are the most affected by it were really upset about it. So the proposal was first floated by the DOT in the middle of July of last year. It got rolled out through a series of Zoom meetings with select organizations. Mine was one of them, where we heard the presentation, and immediately we had concerns. And so from July to now, the community has come together in many different constituencies, and although not maybe everybody agrees on what should be the solution going forward, there was agreement on two key asks, two requests that advocates have been consistent about. One is putting a stop to the multi-hub plan because riders know it's bad for transit. And two is to secure a commitment from the governor to an open, public, transparent process that has stakeholder input. Where it goes from there, there's many options. And by the way, I'll point out that there are some options that remain on the table that have been presented, two of which have had a fair amount of public input. One was a proposal by the city of Providence in 2018 for a remake of Kennedy Plaza that would achieve two important goals. One is making Kennedy Plaza a more inviting public gathering space, which we agree that needs to happen, but also improving the transit function and experience through downtown Providence. So the city's plan, we believed, would achieve that. It got a fair amount of public input. It was a little surprising to us that the city seemed to walk away from that in favor of the current multi-hub proposal. And then there was the original idea that sort of gave, was the impetus behind the transit hub bond issue, which was this proposal for a multimodal transportation hub at the train station. And we can look at this later, but I just wanted to point out that this page that Sue may share has links to those alternatives as well. But I guess the key thing that I wanted to reinforce before I go much further is there has been a bit of a breakthrough last month at a press event to kick off the opening of construction season. There was a protest, and the director of DOT, Peter Alviti, came over to those who were there at the time and announced that he was pausing the multi-hub plan in order to give more time for public input. So we took that as a win, and there hasn't been any further word about that in the last 30 days or so. I suspect that they're gathering together some other data. I know that RIPTA has worked on some alternatives, and we're certainly trying to promote and call attention to some of the alternatives that we think can achieve those two important goals, because they're goals that we share as well as transit riders. We recognize there's a lot of negative issues with Kennedy Plaza that need to be addressed. I want to emphasize that we are not against any change. We think change is needed, but we just want it to be done the right way. This is going to have lasting impacts. This is also coming at a time when we've got this new transit master plan that really aims to create a transit system that's attractive and appealing to more Rhode Islanders. So we have the one issue of people who, 81% of people who use RIPTA are dependent on RIPTA. They do not have access to a private vehicle. And then there's a whole other number of people who could be transit riders if the system were, if it got more people where they need to go quickly and efficiently, which it doesn't always do that right now. If you open, Google Maps and you plot an origin and destination, and you look at the transit option, and then you compare it to the auto option, in almost all cases, maybe not every case, but in many cases, the travel time is about twice as long. So that's a disincentive right there for using transit if you can't really get where you're going in a reasonable amount of time. So we think that the transit master plan offers this opportunity, and we think it's an important step to be taken in light of the fact that we've got the Act on Climate, which has very aggressive targets for emissions reductions. Couple of stats that I'll share that I think are really relevant and important is that even today, as we sit here today, almost 80% of our state's population lives within a 10-minute walk of a transit stop, which is a pretty remarkable number. I don't think any other state can claim that. It's due in part to, our smallness, but also our sort of compact development patterns. And yet, with almost 80% of the people that live within a 10-minute walk of a transit stop, less than 3% of Rhode Islanders use transit as a means to commute. And those come from US Census numbers. If you want to compare that to our neighbors in Massachusetts, they're at about 10% statewide. Our neighbors in Connecticut at about 6%. We're less than 3%. So there's a lot of room for opportunity for mode shift, decrease reliance on cars. Not suggesting that people necessarily get rid of their car. They won't, but maybe a 3-car household could go to a 2-car household, or a 2 could go to a 1, and people could still keep their car, but make better use of transit on a daily basis. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to hit those aggressive targets without there being a significant mode shift to transit. I think electrification is important, but that's going to take some time to ramp up, and you still have a lot of existing cars that are going to be in the pipeline. So there's a lot of reasons that we need to get this right when it comes to the very heart of our state's transit system, which is in downtown Providence. So at this point, I don't want to talk too much at you, but I think that I've conveyed most of the relevant facts. I guess the final thing to say is that we're not alone. A lot of organizations have weighed in about this, including the Providence City Council, voting unanimously to approve a resolution opposing the multi-hub plan. They did that, I think, back in October. And there are several letters of opposition that you can see on that webpage that Sue will share later. And there's just much more detail. There's links to the actual plans, which you're welcome to. Yeah, there we go. There's the Title VI complaint at the top, which we filed on MLK Day. There's also a link to RIDOT's response to it. I do think that even though they claim that there was no Title VI violation, it was a really weak response. I'll let you be the judge of it. I think that may have had something to do with their decision to pause. And then here you see the alternatives, of which there are. I mean, there are alternatives. These are the first two have had public vetting. The third one hasn't, but it's still on the table. And then you can see the letters of opposition. And there's been a pretty steady stream of media coverage since this was the plan was revealed in July of last year. So with that, I would be very happy to have a conversation with you all and answer any questions and see where we go from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. So before we turn to questions, I just want to say three things. One is, Angela or Lauren, would you mind promoting Dwayne Keys from attendee to being part of the panel? He's joining this conversation from the South Providence Neighborhood Association. And then I also want to recognize that Councilman Salvatore has joined us. He'll talk in a little bit about his Green and Complete Streets program, which goes really hand in hand with the conversation we're having now. And also want to recognize that Vatikumba has joined us.
Yep, so noted.
Sorry, that was a lot all at once. And I'll email out that link to everybody, both attendees, both task force members and my list of attendees / stakeholders. So John, everyone will have that.
Thank you.
With that, Dwayne, was there anything you would like to add? And then also we can open it up to conversation and questions. Welcome, Dwayne. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Sorry, my apologies for joining late. No, I think John definitely covered pretty much everything in terms of the aspect of it. I think the perspective from the neighbors that I just want to share is that when this idea was first floated to us back in the fall of 2016, and this was the city of Providence and RIPTA, not RIDOT, who were sharing this idea. There were many of our neighbors who went to that planning meeting. We had heard about it. We had then had our own meeting afterwards, followed up, and we did our own mini analysis. And there were questions about really, how does this improve transit? How does this improve the rider experience? Does this reduce fares? Does this reduce commute times? There was nothing that we saw that benefited riders. It was nothing also that seemed to be that this was addressing transit. It seemed as though we're using transit money for non-transit stuff. So I think that was quite alarming with this whole experience. And with John going through his timeline, just like we never heard about it again, we just assumed they let it go. And so I think another thing with the community is that given that the impacts of COVID had placed our attention elsewhere, I think for many of the residents, particularly the residents of color, feel as though that it was intentional that during a pandemic, when our attention is focused on everything else, and you wouldn't think that the community would rally to oppose this plan, this was the opportunity they saw it to try to move forward with it. So I think in terms of, their response, it was very weak, was because we pretty much called out exactly what they were trying to do. And I don't think that they were prepared for it. I don't think that they anticipated anyone was going to go there in terms of our complaints. And so here we are right now, waiting to hear what this slowdown process actually looks like, because even that has not been communicated.
Wow, thank you, Dwayne.
By the way, I want to mention that the Title VI complaint that was filed on MLK Day was a joint complaint by Dwayne and myself, and that it's a pretty lengthy complaint, but it's available on that page. You're welcome to review it.
Thank you guys for all the work you're doing on this. This has come up in prior task force meetings as something that folks really wanted to discuss. So I'll not talk and see if other folks have comments or questions or want to dig in on anything. Feel free to just come off mute.
No questions or anything, but yeah, thank you to John and Dwayne for the work you've done on this. And that website is what a wonderful just compiling of all of the complaints and the news coverage and all that. I'd honestly be kind of surprised if anyone here was in favor of it. I feel like everyone I've ever talked to who lives in the city or rides a bus is against this. And as someone who does rely on RIPTA, I don't have a car in the city. I'm an able-bodied person and I have trouble catching my bus transfers sometimes. And that's in KP the way it is now. So I can't even, like, every time I hear about it, I can't even imagine it being any easier for anyone who actually rides a bus to break up the hub. And so thank you both for all the work and the presentation that you've done today.
Other questions or comments from task force members? Looking around the table. Yeah, Julian.
Briefly, and echoing thank you both and everyone involved in pushing back on this for the work that you've been doing and for taking the time to bring it to us today. I think it's that classic story of power and powerlessness and kind of building power to oppose the way things are done. So I guess just the question that I have is around what's needed either from this body or from other kind of key stakeholders in general. I know there's a lot of organizing and kind of bringing people together, kind of waiting for the response on it. But in terms of building towards a better vision of transit in the state and the work that both of you are engaged in along with other partners, what's being done or how can people get engaged in terms of being part of building power to really shift that conversation and build a transit equity vision that is better for everyone?
It's a great question. I'll take a first stab at it and then pass it to Dwayne. I think one of the first things is if this group, as a group, agrees with this position, would be to just get something officially in writing to the governor, to the DOT. I know that the governor has been listening. I think that the governor had something to do with this pause, I suspect. And then just remain engaged. There's also a link on the page to a petition that's been signed by well over 1,000 people. You could add your name to the petition and be ready to engage when they do open it back up for public input. I think that they're probably gathering together sort of a plan B before they engage the public, is my guess. I haven't heard a thing since it was reported that they were hitting the pause button. And so just be ready to engage and take the opportunity to learn about what some of the alternatives are, which include keeping everything, keeping it mostly in Kennedy Plaza, but having a better balance between uses there, which I know has been something that many stakeholders in the city itself has been wanting for a long time. I don't know, Dwayne. Actually, one last thing is that Grossmart was just recently awarded a grant from the United Way as part of its Community Impact Fund to do education, outreach, and advocacy around transit and equity. And so we're going to be putting together, one of the very first things is putting together, and I'll thank Leah for her help and guidance about putting together an advisory committee that's compensated to guide the work that's going to take place over about a 2-year period. And it's really going to be, it's not focused on necessarily on the hub issue, although that'll be part of it, but it's going to be about how do we go about implementing the transit master plan, which has now been vetted and it's been adopted. How do we do that in an equitable way? And how do we accelerate it? So there's going to be a lot of conversation about this. We'll have forums. There's going to be a lot of opportunity to engage. So I would just say to sort of keep your ear to the ground, and when you see something, jump on board, and we would love to have more voices. Wayne?
So the main thing that I'm finding is still an issue is that there are many RIPTA riders who do not know about this plan, who have not heard about it. So the one thing we have definitely been focusing on is letting residents know, letting those who are riding the bus or those who they may know who are riding the bus of this plan. That is the main component of, from SB&A's standpoint, is that our neighbors, those riders, those who are directly impacted, they need to know exactly what's going on, and encouraging them to also speak up and providing them the contact information and whoever they need to speak to, whether it's city council, mayor, general assembly, the governor, in terms of their own opposition. We do know that right now there was the budget item in the governor's proposed budget for this plan. From my understanding is there are several representatives and state senators, state reps, state senators who also oppose it too. So another thing which we're hoping on is that as we're looking at the fiscal year 2022 budget, that budget will not include the funding for this plan, which then also will set it back even further. So another thing we've been asking is that when people are finding out, what can I do? Also contact your state rep, contact your state senator, ask them to oppose this item in the governor's budget.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwayne and John. And is there like a mailing list or any sort of like, as we're trying to pay attention to this, like forums in which we should be like watching?
Yes, there is. And actually, I know that that Liza is on as a guest, and she has she's the person behind the petition, and is the keeper of the list. We do have a mailing list which we have used. We used it, as a matter of fact, for the issue that Dwayne just raised, which was a House Finance Committee hearing about the budget. There was a provision of the budget that because this bond has lagged for 7 years, they had to actually include language to extend it in order to use it, or else it would have expired. And we were saying, put in a clause that says that the funds can't be used for dismantling, the state's transit hub. So anyway, Liza has been managing that list, and so we should just figure out the best way to get folks who are interested on that list, so you're aware of things as they happen. Also, I'll just call your attention to Facebook. We've got the RI Transit Riders has a Facebook page, and it posts things all the time about this. So I would just like the page and follow it, and you'll be hearing about opportunities to engage further.
Awesome. Thank you both. And I'm looking around at other task force members, one, because you can still totally ask questions and raise comments, but two, it sounds like maybe this is something that Julian and I should write a letter for you guys to approve at our June meeting that we can maybe send around. It sounds like the city council's already voted to oppose it, but if we send that to the mayor and maybe, the Providence reps that represent all of us, if that's something folks are interested, I can put that on my to-do list to work on with Julian, but let me know if that's, it's easier to like read your bodies when we're in a room. So let me know what you're thinking.
I think Amelia wanted to chime in. Did you, Amelia? If not, I can go ahead.
You can go ahead, Ty. I'm trying to chime. I do want to chime in, but my daughter is talking to me. So I'm just trying to balance those two things.
All right, I'll go ahead. Yeah, I am definitely interested in that. And I think thinking about not only addressed to reps and senators that represent Providence, but also should be writing to DOT, to the governor. Like I know from my end, the Environment Council of Rhode Island and also my professional capacity, Green Energy Consumers Alliance signed on to certain letters, but I think in hearing John and Dwayne that we should be ready for what comes next and maybe thinking about drafting also our own letters. And just incorporating what you all want us to emphasize and just being ready to submit that to all the folks that you mentioned, like DOT and the governor. So from my end, I'm making a note, and I know you folks work with my colleague at Green Energy Consumers, Miles Cormoran, so we can be ready to do what you need us to do. And then on the Environment Council of Rhode Island side, I'll make a note so we can put this on the agenda for the policy committee, and we can start drafting our own letters.
For those who may be drafting letters, I would just call your attention to those that are linked on the webpage, because they may give you talking points that you want to reiterate, make your job easier.
That is awesome, John, and it makes it a lot easier. Amelia, is now a good time? No pressure.
I'm really glad that other folks are involved in focusing on this issue, and I've been just following emails and stuff about it. So I appreciate this rundown of all the different issues. And I completely support the community input process and all the efforts that you guys are putting through. One thing this is kind of maybe this is just something that I should bring up like in the public comment when there is a public process. But when I used to be a transit rider many years ago now in Providence, one of the big complaints I would hear is that people didn't want to have to always go to Kennedy Plaza for every single ride. So like having it as like the state hub, it's not like that's the answer necessarily, or but like having different places so that the system itself is designed so that you can go from one place to another without having to go to Kennedy Plaza first and do a transfer or whatever. Is that something that is recognized in all of this? And like, how is that? I just wanted to bring that up and ask that question.
So
That's
it's
a great point. Go ahead,
because
Wayne.
that was actually asked. So I think there's two parts to the answer. One, whatever's being decided, there should be impact assessments, impact studies. So not just robust community engagement, but it's like, okay, if we go left, this is what's going to happen. If we go right, this is going to happen. So that should be assessed, whether we dismantle it, we add additional routes. You should always be assessing what's going to happen. So that's another part of the situation that needs to take place regardless. And that's another reason why we are opposing it, because as I said to one person who's actually in favor of it, show me how this is beneficial to people. Show me how this is going to work and this is going to be so great for the riders, for the community. And that person can't present anything to me to justify that. So that's part number one. Part number two, someone asked me about, well, we have the bond money, we have to spend it. And I said, well, have we thought about having routes that go east and west rather than north and south? And they don't have to. So it's not so much, do we have to break up Kennedy Plaza, is do we find, maybe it's shuttle buses or other ways of having leaner but much more efficient transportation that can still meet the community's needs. But again, assessing that. So there's other ways in which we can use this money. I don't think that that's the issue. The issue here is that we have the folks who are currently, prior were in office that wanted to use this money for their own little personal means. So I know, John, you'll be professional, but I'm going to call out what it is. Again, they wanted to use transit money for non-transit oriented issues. They have the little playground, little mini Central Park, as they said at that presentation back in the fall 2016 to people. And it's not beneficial to anyone. But yes, there are ways in which I really think we can use that money to talk about other ways of really making the transportation system, which, although it's helpful, it's great for folks, it can be certainly much better. And there's so many other ways that we can have more, if even more robust public transportation system, including having alternative routes or other ways which you don't have to go to the Kennedy Plaza to get where you need to get.
I agree with Dwayne. First of all, but I love the question that you raised, Amelia, because it has come up before, this issue of, does everybody have to come into Kennedy Plaza? And in fact, it was one of the things that came out of the transit master planning process when RIPTA engaged the public to determine what works and what doesn't, what do you want to have different. So the plan actually calls for a number of regional hubs outside of downtown Providence. One example that I always think about is one of my former coworkers lives in Cranston, and her daughter had a job like 3 miles from their home, and they had only one car in the family. So the only way and she wanted to take transit, but the only way for her to go to her job in Cranston, 3 miles away from their home, was to travel into Kennedy Plaza on one line, transfer, and then take another line out of Kennedy Plaza to go back to Cranston, but a different part of Cranston. And so that's a perfect example of why you don't want to have everybody come into Kennedy Plaza. And there are RIPTA has developed plans that would allow people to go from other communities to other communities that don't necessarily have to all pass through, because a lot of the time that's spent going in and out of Kennedy Plaza is time spent in traffic, and it's just not necessary. So, it's a great point you raise. But when we talk about having a hub in downtown Providence, that doesn't make any sense to have multiple hubs within downtown Providence where people are making or trying to make transfers. And that's why it's the one thing that riders really, the key standard is having the primary hub that can accommodate all of the necessary transfers. Great question.
Hey, y'all, definitely want to thank y'all for your work. And I agree. I feel like Providence specifically is like a spider web, and there's definitely ways that we can leave downtown and connect other passages. This is just a thought just on like before the pandemic, when I would ride the bus, and really, and I would talk to like the bus drivers, just incorporating bus drivers into this planning. A lot of the times they are community folks who've been driving in Providence their whole life outside of work, and do it as a job. And there are times that like I've talked to bus drivers and there's like a weird turn and there's like someone who's out too far, and they're like, and then they're like, I don't even know why they put this bus stop here. And I'm like, wait, so they don't ask you like if this is even a good place? And they were like, no, they don't ask. I'm like, you work, right? Like this is like you're an employee. And so incorporating their thoughts, and because like they're the ones who have to do that turn and make that turn, and they can tell you, yeah, this bus is not going to make it unless the cutoff, there's an actual line on the street over here, that kind of stuff.
Well, Jesus, my experience has been that that the drivers have engaged, maybe not every driver, and there may be some examples that have slipped through the cracks, but in thinking back to the engagement that took place in 2018 and 2019, drivers were very much a part of it, and for the reason you pointed out, which is that they really know the system because they're driving it, and they see where the friction points are. But it doesn't mean that they've caught every single instance. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Just looking around to see if there's any final questions or comments before we transition over to Counselor Salvatore and the greening. I wish we could just talk about this for forever. I just don't want to leave them hanging. That wasn't me trying to cut things off, but if there are any other final things folks want to say. No, I'm looking at everyone's face.
Thank you again. That's it.
Are we invited to stick around for the?
Oh,
for the
please,
streets?
yeah, definitely stick
Great,
around.
great.
If you're available, please definitely stick around.
Yeah, great.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us too. I'm glad you're going to stick around, and really so grateful for all the work you're doing. And Julian, the vice chair, and I will follow up. Julian and I just signed us up, but with ways that this body can support and get us to vote. I'll put it on our agenda for next time to take an official vote as well, that we can then share with all the folks we've discussed sharing that with.
Thank you all for the opportunity. It's great to be with you.
No, thank you. And we should have prefaced this at the beginning. So the task force, we try and have members from across the city. And so I think our 8 members are from at least 6 different wards, but maybe 7 different wards. I have to look back at the list. So we try and make sure that we're representing the city as a whole and not just certain communities. But without further ado, Councilman, I'm so glad that you were able to join us. We're really excited about your ordinance. I did share it with folks ahead of time, so hopefully folks have had a chance to read it. But would love to just hear from you a little bit about it, and then also express my own gratitude that it's that you've put it forward, but hear a little bit about the next steps for it. I know there had been plans, potentially hear it tonight in ordinances, but maybe it'll be further into June or July, but would love to hear any updates that you have in ways that we might, be able.
Sure.
I'll stop talking. Thank you.
That's okay. No, thank you, Chair and members of the board. David Salvatore. I represent the 14th ward, which is comprised of the Elmhurst and Wanskuck neighborhoods. But I think when we're talking about an issue like this, it certainly impacts almost, if not every resident in the city of Providence. So this is a citywide policy that we've put forth. And, selfishly speaking, when you become a parent or the child of an elderly parent who wants to age in place, your eyes become much wider to these issues that are impacting our city and in our city's neighborhoods. And for me, this is a lot more than visual pleasure or improving aesthetics. This is about creating better health outcomes. This is about creating more access to our local roads and sidewalks, and addressing some of the environmental concerns around stormwater runoff that is moving into our waterways. So a couple of examples that I can provide personally was when my son was born 3 years ago. I took him for a walk. It had to be about a month and a half after he was born. I said, I'm taking him for a walk. It was a great day. And I was on Gentian Avenue. And for those of you who are familiar with Gentian Avenue, it's in the Elmhurst neighborhood. And I had a hard time crossing the street with the stroller. Cars were whizzing by and nobody was stopping as I entered the crosswalk. And more recently, my father, who walks with a walker, we were in front of his home on Nelson Street. And I said, it's a great day outside. Let me take him for a walk. We went outside with my dad and he had his walker, and the number of raised sidewalks, cracked sidewalks was not just alarming, because I certainly know about the issues, but it hits close to home when these issues impact the people who are close to you. And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, there's nothing more heart-wrenching than watching a person with disabilities or an elderly person in our community try to cross a street, even with the presence of a crosswalk. So for me, again, this is about making improvements to a lot of the issues that I've already brought to your attention. And it's also a way of looking at how we create transportation from a holistic perspective, right? So whenever the city engages in a major road project, the Green and Complete Streets ordinance, or public policy, if you will, is certainly going to be commensurate to what we're looking for, not only in terms of design, but environmental justice and also transportation justice. So again, this is something that is not only near and dear to me, but it's near and dear to the people who I represent. And I think it's a good piece of public policy. It's a good starting point for all of the people in the city of Providence in every neighborhood that we represent. So in terms of timing, I was hoping that the matter, and I'm sorry, Chair, do you have a copy of the sub-A that we've been working on?
I don't know that I've seen the sub-A, so if you were able to send that, I would love to send that to the other task force members.
Okay, I can do that when we adjourn.
Yeah.
But we have made some substantial improvements to the policy that we introduced last year. We've worked great with the mayor's office and members of his staff and BPAC, especially Emily. I want to give her a shout out for sitting in on our meetings and providing her recommendations along with BPAC. We think the final product that is going to be introduced or reintroduced is something that a lot of folks are going to enjoy. And again, it's going to impact all of our neighborhoods. And this is, folks, this is more than, again, installing bicycle lanes or speed bumps. This is about the holistic approach to addressing most, if not all, of our streets in Providence. And before, again, the city engages in a major road project, we have to consider all of the transportation modes that are necessary to not only advance economic development, because this is what homeowners want to see in the neighborhoods that they're considering, but also the people who we represent currently and their ability to move throughout the city for various reasons. So again, I appreciate all of you taking the time to express interest in this public policy. We're hoping that a public hearing is scheduled in the very near future, hoping that will be scheduled in June. And anything that you can do to be participatory in that public process would be appreciated. This is going to require a lot of support. I don't want to say it's going to be a heavy lift, because I do think there's broad support across the city for it. But I think anytime residents of the city get in front of our legislative branch expressing their support or opposition for public policy, that's the way you advance good public policy like this. So again, thank you for your interest in this topic. I'm happy to answer any questions for you at this time about the issue.
Thank you so much for joining us and for that explanation. Before I ask any questions, do any other task force members have questions or comments? Feel free to just come off mute. Amelia, yeah.
I just wanted to thank Councilman Salvatore just to being the champion of this issue. It's such a great issue, so important. I'm really glad that Providence is taking the lead on it.
Thank you, Amelia.
Yeah, thanks for coming through and sharing information. I guess I just want to understand. You said that there's going to be like public comment and things like that, and so I want to understand what involvement have community had in the decisions that are being made, because we've seen like the speed humps and things like that, and the speed tables that have been coming up. So just want to understand a little bit more about the process of how those places were decided on, and like what the plan is, since I haven't really got a chance to look at it yet.
Sure. So I can speak for my neighborhood, and typically what I do to schedule community meetings are to have meetings with neighbors on the street. So whether it's housing or transportation, whatever the issue might be, it's great to gather the people who reside on the street, who are impacted the most by a lot of the decisions that we're making as city council members in collaboration with city agencies and departments. So for wherever you see speed bumps or pedestrian lanes for bicycling or pedestrian traffic, those are installed after there has been public engagement with the residents who reside on the street. Sometimes what I'll also do is engage in social media polls and engage in some conversation on Facebook and Twitter, just to ask what people are thinking, what they could live with, what they don't want to see. So that's what I do personally as one city council member. Included in the public policy that the city council is going to consider, I have asked for language to be included that asks for robust public engagement. So anytime the city does open a road and considers public safety measures such as a bicycle lane or speed bumps, there would be an opportunity for the community to engage in that public process. That's very important. I've expressed to my constituents that I will not unilaterally make a decision around these issues, and that their input is probably most paramount to implementing successful traffic calming measures throughout the city and keeping people safe.
Thank you for that. To follow up on the conversation, is this proposal really to advocate for making streets safer for pedestrians? And like, I just want to, I guess, backtrack a little bit. Been like looking at transportation and thinking of it in different perspectives. There's a good podcast that I've listened to. Is called United States of Anxiety, and they have a good framing of talking about how, back in the 1800s and things like that, like roads were for pedestrians. And then as the turn of the century, like automobiles became king and everybody was doing city planning around automobiles. So I wanted to ask, is this part of more of a plan to make streets for things outside of just cars? Or is this just something so that people who drive cars, we can walk sometimes? Like, I just want to understand the larger scope and the vision.
Sure. This is all about creating a holistic approach to transportation. And yes, we want to keep people behind the wheel safe, but not everybody owns a car. Not everybody wants to own a car, me included, but I have to. But this is about the person with disabilities, the person who wants to age in place, the mother and or the father who wants to walk their child on a local road. As a former runner, runners run in the street. They don't run on sidewalks. And there's a reason for that. Okay, so again, this is more about taking a holistic approach on how people move about the city. It's, yes, we want to keep people behind the wheel safe. We want to keep people on our RIPTA buses safe as well, and provide them with the same access to a road that vehicular vehicles do. So again, this is about, yes, keeping people who are on foot safe, people who want to age in place safe, persons with disabilities safe. And yes, we want to keep the person behind the wheel safe as well. I live on Academy Avenue, and because of speed, the same house that I remember growing up with as a child was hit. The front of the house was hit at the end of Academy Avenue and Mink Road. And this has been an ongoing issue from the time that I can remember until the present day. So yes, the house can be fixed, but God forbid there was a child or anybody standing on that sidewalk, we would be having a very different conversation today.
Appreciate that. Last thing, and I'm
Yes,
pass it to somebody else. So yeah, I'm in your ward as well. And so every day I walk down River, and so some days like today it's good. But is there anything in your plan around snow? So like the sidewalks are not cleared when you're saying in the winter and things like that. Is there anything to make walking and being mobile accessible year round in this plan?
Yeah, so there's nothing to address snow, and I think that's a great question. And this is something that we're consistently talking about and considering as council people, because we do hear about the homeowner who doesn't have the resources to move snow or ice from their sidewalk, although it is their responsibility. I think we need to really have constructive dialogue with our nonprofits and our neighbors about lending a hand. And it's not happening enough. There's a perennial bill that gets introduced every year at the State House around sidewalks that are part of the overpasses. And the state doesn't do a very good job of clearing snow from those sidewalks. I mean, I agree with you. This is an ongoing issue. And River Avenue, I'm not sure which part of River Avenue you live at, but the northern part between Admiral Street and Douglas Avenue, you're going to be receiving new sidewalks using community development block grant funding this summer. I've earmarked money for those sidewalks because they're in rough shape. They haven't been repaired in years. Many of them are broken. But I do think we need to have constructive dialogue around removing snow. And honestly, I don't think it's something that we can legislate. We can tell homeowners that we're going to fine them $1,000 per storm for not removing the snow and ice. It's very difficult to enforce. I think we have to come up with some creative solutions around removing snow and ice from these sidewalks so that people can, to your point, move safely around their neighborhoods.
You just pay people with snow blowers to come and do it.
I think
like downtown, same thing.
There are some cities who have piloted programs around city employees doing this. They've purchased very small plows, if you will, that are made for sidewalks. Now, the issue that we run into is a lack of resources. We have drivers in the plows. We have folks, inspecting the work of contractors. But I think if we made this a priority in the city's budget, we could pilot this program. I would love to see it happen in the 14th ward. But I think it could be successful if the right allocations were made in the budget.
It could be a mayor's winter jobs program for youth instead of just summer jobs.
That's a great idea. Look, this is my 10th year on the council. You have that neighbor or those neighbors who call the council person every snowstorm. Typically they're elderly neighbors. Say, can you find somebody to shovel the sidewalk? And if I can't find a youth in the neighborhood to do it, I end up owning it. So if I do it at one snowstorm, guess what? The next snowstorm, guess who's out there shoveling the sidewalk? So, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Plus I could use the exercise.
Other questions? Awesome questions, Vadik, and great idea, Amelia. Other questions or comments?
One little bit tangential to it, but in terms of just the quality of streets, and I think you mentioned the overpasses and the kind of intersection with state roads versus city roads. Mm-hmm. Something that we've seen come up a lot in my section of town is the quality of Allen's Ave as just a roadway, and kind of comparing, different sections, different neighborhoods, and the kind of the larger roads that travel through there. You're looking at Huntington Expressway compared to Blackstone Boulevard, compared to Allen's Avenue, and especially along truck routes, and especially along Allen's Ave, the issue with just kind of grit, dirt, scrap metal, many punctured bike tires and car tires along that stretch of road. Just kind of looking at, responsibility, especially for some of the companies along that road in terms of maintaining good road quality for everyone along there. I know there's been a lot of effort around kind of bike safety in other areas, but it's a continuous, and it's something that has it's not just the city's responsibility, but it is in the city, and is a consistent issue for the neighborhood.
And there are small businesses along that corridor. There are small businesses who are impacted by folks' inability to move in their neighborhoods. So yes, I think DOT and the city need to connect and see what they can do around the port to create a better transportation system that is equitable to everybody.
Any other questions from folks around the table?
So I would just ask,
yeah.
just keep doing what you're doing. These aren't easy solutions, whether we decide as a city to install speed bumps or bicycle lanes. I'll give you another example. On Academy Avenue, where I live, we had a community meeting last summer, I believe, to look at different calming measures, traffic calming measures. And what we all decided was that we were going to narrow the lanes by creating a parking lane, and then the median strip in the middle of the road, we would widen that as well. Well, this morning, my neighbors came out, they saw the outlines in the road, and they didn't understand what it was. I said, well, this is what we all agreed to. And, you know, my neighbor's calling Channel 10, another one's calling me saying, what are we doing? How could you narrow the road? Well, this is what we agreed to. So it's either this, or we can install the permanent infrastructure measure, which you all don't want. So let's see if this works. My message to you is keep talking about this, talk to your neighbors about it, reach out to your council people. This is important. If we're not addressing these quality of life issues and providing for the environmental justice, the transportation justice that our residents deserve, then we're doing a disservice to the people who we represent. So I appreciate your hard work and your interest again in this topic.
Thank you so much, Councillor. And I can put this back on our agenda. It sounds like there's a sub-A, which I'm excited to see and share. And maybe we can have this on our agenda in June for a potential support and letter and things like that, and discuss strategy about how we can best support it as a task force after everyone's had a chance to read that sub-A.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair and members of the task force.
Thank you so much. This was really fantastic. And I can say when I used to chair or co-chair the state's hunger elimination task force, Green and Complete Streets ordinance was one of the top recommendations from community members across the state, because they couldn't get to people can't get to basic services, including food. Even just like living across the street from a store or a food bank, like people can't get to it because it's so dangerous. Or carry their food home in a way that doesn't involve a car. So yeah, I'm just really excited to see Providence taking this up.
Good, excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Awesome. So we have a few other things on our agenda. I know this was a really packed time, so I'm so grateful for all of you for being here and being so engaged. Let me just open back up the agenda real quick because I have you on full screen. Going back around to the top, Leah and Emily and Rob, do you guys want to give some updates about the work of the office?
Yeah, happy to. I'll try to be quick here. So one, I wanted to give an update on where we are for our budget going into fiscal year 22. We had our meeting with the Finance Committee last Wednesday, and that went well. We have a budget that has been submitted is pretty robust. We have, of course, all of our positions fully funded with the general fund, including the Climate Justice Policy Associate, which we would hope to be able to fill with the passage of the budget. We also have $110,000 for program support, $30,000 for miscellaneous, and then about $12,000 for materials and supplies. So very excited to hopefully have that funding to support us in fiscal year 22. Any questions on that?
That's awesome, Leah. Pre-congratulations, hoping it passes, and gratitude for all of your hard work and getting those resources for this work.
Thank you. I see we have the ordinance on the agenda later, but we're very excited to see the ordinance that passed for the second time on last Thursday, and already thinking about if we can do some sort of signing with the mayor. So more to come on that. And then looks like there's some movement with the community choice segregation program and approval from the PUC. So fingers crossed, we could have that maybe later this week, but I'm not fully sure on the timeline, but it is moving along. And then Emily, do you want to give a quick update on pesticide-free PVD and the plastic bag enforcement?
Sure. We are inviting residents to take the pledge to eliminate the use of pesticide and chemical fertilizers in lawns and gardens. And residents that do so can get a free yard sign to post at their home. We're hoping that commission members can consider taking that pledge and have conversations with their friends and families and neighbors about the harmful health and environmental impacts of such chemicals. As of right now, over 40 individuals and organizations have signed on to the pledge in our first month of pesticide-free PVD. I will note that 45% of pledge takers are on the east side. Of course, eliminating pesticides and chemical fertilizers in our lawns and gardens is a really critical first step for the health of our community and ecosystem. But we also have been wanting to acknowledge that many of us don't have a lawn or a garden. And so we also want to turn inside of our homes and discuss how we manage pests indoors and where other dangerous chemicals enter our indoor environment, like cleaning products. There's kind of an endless amount of chemicals once you go inside the home, but we're focusing on the most explicit, like pests inside our homes, cleaning products. So we have a little bit of a budget remaining that we're hoping to leverage to work with partner organizations to incorporate pesticide-free PVD into existing on-the-ground research. There's some good overlaps with promoting compost with partners like Groundwork, because compost is a great non-chemical fertilizer, and particularly partnering with in frontline communities, given that concentration on the east side. I think this was also a suggestion from Amelia. I've also had some really great conversations with the Department of Health, different teams in the Department of Health, about outreach to daycare and early childcare facilities in Providence, and taking some of the information that the Department of Environmental Management has on dangerous cleaning chemicals. They have an EPA pollution prevention grant that's really building out some information about cleaning supplies and chemicals and better alternatives to certain cleaning chemicals. And so I'm hoping to work with the Department of Health to do some targeted outreach on that to childcare facilities. So that's pesticide-free PVD. I can pause for if anyone has any questions or comments or suggestions.
Thanks again. Just wondering on like what does outreach look like for folks who like landlords who like live in their homes? Like just like specifically like that.
For landlords that live in their home, or do you mean for tenants that don't own their?
Like for people who own the house that they're living in. Like what does that like? I feel like those folks are the folks who, I don't know, can like if they don't have that like that obstacle of being able to use the area, they're the folks who have the
Hey, Suze, it's a little hard to hear you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's like
Oh, is there some? I think if everyone who's not talking could mute themselves, I think there's some background noise.
Okay. And so basically what I was just saying, for folks who own their land, I feel like they have the most means to be like, this is what I want, like sign up for what's allowed in my house versus a renter sometimes they might have like obstacles. Like I don't really like, my landlord lives in my house. So like, I don't really have much of a say of what happens in the backyard. They're like, no, they're like, I want chickens, and like, they're doing all the good stuff. But like, just wanted to see what.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of the divide that we're grappling with, is that, like, you know, lawns and gardens and people who have control over how lawns and gardens are managed are homeowners. And that is not the majority of Providence residents. And so that's why we're trying to really like expand most pesticide, like the pesticide-free campaign is modeled off of that like lowest hanging fruit of like people that are spraying chemicals outside. But that's kind of why we're trying to just broaden a little and talk a little bit more about chemicals that we do have control over as renters. Like, for example, having like samples of like, oh, instead of using those Lysol wipes, consider this like more natural mixture and things like that. Sorry.
There's like 3 easy things that you have like at home already, that like vinegar and like water and
yeah. I like that idea of just like making it more relatable to folks that may not be controlled, may not have green space right at their back door or front door.
We'd be happy to give you some flyers to disseminate to your household if that would be helpful.
Yeah, are there, I guess that's the question I had building on Jesus. Are there flyers that have gone out like in the community, or like, what does the outreach look like? I've seen a few of the signs. And I also see so many signs of people who are using pesticides. So I just want to help over
Yeah,
that.
they really make it easy. Yeah, they really make it easy for us to target them.
Well, I haven't had a chance to do that. I think Leah has handed out flyers to people with pesticide signs in their yard. It's really just been like early adopters thus far, like folks that have already been advocates of not using chemicals and have heard about the campaign. There's definitely tons of opportunity to do. We're planning to do a little bit of tabling this summer at the farmers market, I think, with Zero Waste, Providence, and Harvest Cycle. And if you have other ideas of like, and at the Rain Harvest Art Festival, we'll be there to talk about pesticide free. If you have other thoughts about like, you should attend this and be available and encourage people to take the pledge, we're happy to do that.
That made me think about for people who do have lawns, ticks and mosquitoes are the reason, you know, a lot of people, I guess that's why people put pesticides down. So maybe like coordinating some joint messaging with like the Department of Health climate change program or something, like around tick prevention, like alternative tick prevention, or
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I connected with a landscaper who was interested in the campaign, and that was something that he also flagged for me of you should really dig into the recommendation for ticks and mosquitoes, because that's many of the reason, often the reason that people are reaching for chemicals.
Yeah, and if there's like a natural or non-disgusting alternative for that, like I know I am a homeowner and I get a lot of ads from like companies that really want me to spray a whole bunch of stuff in my yard, and it's like pretty, you know, I just took the pledge because I keep forgetting to do it, but I think people just get blanketed with these things reminding them that there's ticks and there's mosquitoes and there's disease and we can come spray and it's only $50 and blah blah. And if there were easy materials that you'd be like, oh, actually you can, it's fine if you do, you know, whatever the thing is.
Ever since I've been like Googling things around pesticide free PVD on my Facebook feed, I've been getting organic lawn care.
Oh, nice.
So maybe now, Sue, they're listening. So you'll get.
Oh, nice. Maybe I should start Googling organic lawn care. I'll get this.
Yeah.
I like take pictures of the ads and send them to a friend who works at Audubon. I'm like, this is so scary. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and there's some great, like Audubon and Save the Bay have pretty aligned messaging around fertilizer reduction and pesticide and the harms of pesticides on that front. The other piece was the manual enforcement process is coming together for the plastic bag ban. I'm adapting the Viewpoint payment database system that we use for exemption requests to be our primary hub for taking and just tracking violations. Of course, with the manual option as well if payment is required. We also needed to establish a pathway to contest the violation. There's a little bit of echo. If in municipal court, we don't expect this to happen too often. Again, the first violation will be a warning without a fee, and the other subsequent offenses will have a fee. And the enforcement checklist that I'm developing to make sure that when we visit in person, it's all very consistent and we record the violation. Hopefully it won't be super easy to contest the fact that you were handing out plastic bags, and that is why you have received a notice of violation. But we do need to have that in place just in case any retailer wants to use that as an ordinance. So we feel comfortable saying that enforcement will begin no later than July 1st. First heard here. The process is more manual than expected, and again, we don't have additional capacity for enforcement within the Office of Sustainability. So it will be important to lean on existing business associations and other networks for continued education and compliance. And the other primary opportunity or efficiency that I'm hopeful about is just making sure that we're syncing compliance with the plastic bag ban with the ability of any business to secure or renew their business license within the city. It's not a direct correlation like of who, not every business necessarily has a business license, but that's a good and easy thing to make sure that we're doing.
That's awesome. Thank you. Can I just say I'm impressed with the amount of of stores and the things around me that have maintained, like for a second during the pandemic, got plastic bags. And I was like, what? Y'all just switched. And it was like, yeah, but we can't find plastic paper bags. And then now are back on it. And then hearing the mandate still hasn't even happened, and they're already in that culture. I'm happy for.
Oh, that makes me feel really good. I feel like I go everywhere I go. I'm just like, oh no.
Restaurants, on the other hand, that's another thing. But I can say that my bodega has done really good.
We are gonna make little thank you notes because there's gonna be a lot of well, not a lot, as much visiting as we can manage, so that we're able to leave behind oh, we were here, and also thank you for switching to paper bags.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with this, Suze. I've noticed a difference, the quick difference at the start of the pandemic and also where we're at now. And then I live in Elmhurst, but I'm borderline Providence and North Providence. So sometimes I go into North Providence, and I'm also starting to see a change in the market there. I don't know if it's because of customers like me, where I'm where are the paper bags? I'm used to paper bags in Providence. So hopefully we keep having some more of that spillover effect where other neighboring cities and towns also follow the trend that Providence has set.
That's awesome. I wonder if there's not that more work needs to happen, but there's a way when we see really good businesses, if there's a way we can celebrate and just be woo, Jesus's Bodega, or other places that we're just, want to thank. Obviously all this, everyone should be doing it, but sometimes celebrating, then other people are oh, hey, wait, I'm still using plastic. What am I doing? Or whatever, but it's also just nice to lead with celebration and gratitude. Cool. Any other updates from the office?
That's it. Thank you all.
The other thing on the agenda, it looks like, sorry, I keep making you full screen and then losing the agenda. And Leah covered it, is so there's the two ordinances, the sustainability ordinance, which you remember codifies the goals of the climate justice plan, as well as creates the Office of Sustainability, not just the director position, and changes our task force to the Sustainability Commission and adds youth seats and codifies the 2 seats for the REJC members that we've been doing as practice anyway, but because that of course we're doing that. That passed twice, and so it's done passing. It's so exciting. And now just for the mayor to sign. Leah, I'm looking at you. I think that's the last thing. And so we'll see when that happens, but hopefully soon. And that's really exciting that got that passed, and it kind of happened very quickly. The bureau ordinance is still hanging out there.
Before we move on to Barrow, just one thing to point out on that is the 2 environmental justice seats. So we have Badak and Jesus, who have been on the commission and filling those seats, but now we're gonna have 2 more seats. So
oh, great.
Yeah, so because the seats that Jesus and Badak have now are like
regular seats. Oh, so we get 2 additional environmental justice seats. Oh, that is awesome. That is even better than I realized. Sorry, I really should have realized that like a year ago when we were.
So, I think we would at this probably defer to the REJC,
yeah.
And either Jesus and Badak, you can slide into those seats and we can fill, anyway, so there's a few ways to go about that, but just something to think about.
Oh, great. Okay, once it finishes passage, Badak and Jesus, I'll check in with you and we can see if how we want to handle that. And then it also, the youth seats call for youth-led organizations to pick the folks from those seats. And I know Leah and I have been talking to some youth-led groups. Leah joined in on a meeting, and so we should have an update on that in a little bit as well. But if folks have ideas about how to connect with youth-led groups and thoughts about what that process could look like, I'll turn it over to Leah. But if that could be a topic for a future meeting of,
Yeah, so I met with past Providence Alliance for School Safety, and there's a coalition of various like PSU and I think PRISM and various youth-led organizations, and they're very excited. They're trying to do something similar at the state level for education oversight in general, and so they saw this as a really good opportunity to get involved and kind of figure out how that process would look like. One thing also I would just mention is that we'll probably have to have some conversations with the clerk's office to sort out just how that appointment goes, because it's coming from, the ordinance says appointed by a youth-led organization. So what we really would love to do is to really defer to the community on that appointment process. And hopefully, I think we can use, if depending our budget, some of our program funding to support such a process and support youth-led organizations to not only put 2 people in those seats, but to also really support them throughout the year and as they serve and do kind of organizing beyond that so those individuals are more than just the 2 individuals. They're really representing a broader community of youth in the city. So lot to figure out in terms of the mechanics, but again, our goal as much as possible, similar to the EJ seats, is really to defer to community on who and how that appointment process happens.
Awesome, thank you, Leah. And once the mayor signs the ordinance, which has passed council twice, we can put that back on the agenda to think about how, as a council, or as a commission, just have a discussion. But it's really exciting to think that both will be expanding membership and then also getting some great youth voices in here. And I think a number of you had mentioned to me that we do have an open seat right at this moment. And a couple folks had mentioned that they had folks they were thinking about. And so feel free to reach out if there are folks of interest. We can put on our either June or July agendas what the process could be for evaluating folks who have interest now and getting out an actual application that we can also distribute as well. So there is an existing application. We might want to revisit it because we've been using the same one for many years at this point, but we can put that on our agenda about how we can recruit for the seat we already have open, plus the exciting new opportunities. I don't know, Leah, if you want to give the quick update on Barrow, I can start and just say Leah did an amazing job presenting on Barrow at the Finance Committee where it was up for, just so you remember where we are in the journey, it has had its public hearing. So it was referred to Finance. It had its public hearing. Really positive and really wonderful testimony at the public hearing from a number of different organizations, and really we got, I forget how many people, but it was well over 100 people who signed on very quickly to a petition supporting Barrow ahead of that public hearing. And then it was heard again in Finance in the last few weeks ago. And Leah did an amazing job explaining it to council members, answering their questions. Council person Anthony also, who's the lead sponsor. I found it to be a very frustrating meeting. There were questions asked by councilors that had already been answered. And I don't think that they really heard and understood the broad community support that this has. So, but I thought Leah and the council person Anthony did just such an amazing job representing it. And it can still, Councilwoman Anthony ended asking for it to come back to the full council for the council to vote. And so I'm not sure, but Leah might know if there's any next steps proposed for it. Otherwise, I can check in with Councilor Anthony on what she might see as some next steps and what might be a role for the task force.
Nope, I don't know much at this point. Beyond that, there's some concerns around, the Office of Sustainability being the one to enforce the policy and wanting that to move to Department of Inspections and Standards. That's fine. Certainly there are advantages and disadvantages for us not doing it ourselves, but we'll make it work either way. So yeah, but I don't know if it's going to be put on the Finance Committee agenda in the near future or not.
The other concern that I heard raised was, should it be voluntary or not? And Councilwoman Anthony did a great job of saying, no, that there's already a voluntary program that Rob is doing a really wonderful job with. And so businesses can already participate in the voluntary program, and they should. Like, if that's what they want to do, they should definitely sign up now. Proof of concept, but the ordinance is really to make it mandatory, and that's the goal of the ordinance. So I'll follow up if and when I hear more. And then Priscilla, do you have a quick update from ECRI? No pressure if you don't. I did not prep you.
But it's okay. Off the top of my head, we have a couple key dates. One of them being our annual meeting. So the Environment Council of Rhode Island meets once a month, the first Monday of the month. But our June meeting turns into our annual meeting. So same time, 5:30 online. But this year's program is going to be dedicated towards celebrating 50 years of the Environment Council. So we'll spend some time going over the history and more, not only as a celebratory agenda item, but also just really grounding ourselves on how we want to re-envision the council and the direction it will be headed in as we're doing our strategic planning process. So we'll also hear from Greg Garrett. He will be our honored speaker, and he will also help us honor environmental advocates that are retiring. And we'll hear from Resolve Conservation, which is the consultant we've hired to do our equity-based strategic planning process as to what the process will look like over the next 6 to 8 months. And yeah, start working on that new direction and restructuring of the council. And let's see, the other thing that we're working to confirm, we usually do like an Earth Day at the State House, which has really passed. It's been an unusual legislative session, so we're thinking about doing a virtual lobby day as a last push for our policy priorities, and we're hoping to set that either for, I think it's June 3rd or June 4th. depending on the schedule of both the Senate and House leadership, and it will be sometime in the morning. So as soon as I have that information, so I can go ahead and share it. I can share a link to both that legislative event and also the annual meeting. And I almost forgot, on Wednesday night, the Climate Crisis Campaign, the Project of ECRI, we're going to do a climate advocate training focusing on 100% renewable energy or renewable electricity, getting to 100%, and also the Transportation and Climate Initiative, a Cap and Invest program geared towards reducing emissions and talking about what it could mean for communities if that program were to move forward. So that is Wednesday night, and I can also forward that to you, Sue.
Awesome. And I think I already have that link because I'm signed up, so I can share that with the task force right after the call or later tonight. Let me just make a note to do that so I don't forget, in case folks want to go to that. Anything else, Priscilla?
Those are the 3 key events happening.
Awesome. And I know we're just about over time, but the last thing is just an update on from Julian and I about the Energy Facility Siting Board proposed fossil fuel expansion at the port. The public comment for this was due before we had a chance of a meeting. So Julian and I, after I emailed you to get if you were okay or not okay with it, we sent a letter as the 2 of us. We didn't say it was from the task force because we did not have a vote from everyone, but we sent it as the 2 of us, saying that we were the chair and vice chair. But we did email out, and I got a lot of positive response from many of you, not all of you, that you were okay with us sending it, but we could not send it on behalf of the task force. Just it's a weird time, because we didn't vote, and that is how things should work. That we should get to vote. But wanted to make sure you guys all saw that, and Julian is the one who wrote it, did an amazing job. So just also wanted to give him a chance to talk about it if he wanted to, and have any comments or questions here. I know we're running low on time and it's important, so it's something we can add to a future agenda as well, so we can have more time.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it really brief because I know we're over time. And if we talk about it at a future one, it might be good to have some of the community groups that are organizing around it, Monica or someone else, be able to speak to it as well. And maybe also someone from the Attorney General's office, and the AG's office put in a pretty detailed kind of letter. There was initial things that they'd raised some concerns about, and then they followed up with a lot. So there was quite in a really short period of time, a lot of organizations and people weighing in, which was great to see. Our letter, because this part of the process was really around whether or not the Energy Facility Siting Board should look at this and require an application. And so it wasn't necessarily weighing in about whether we as a board or as chair and vice chair were in favor or not in favor of it, but we're just raising a lot of questions and saying that, obviously it does need to be vetted fully. Communities need to be engaged fully, and kind of laying out what some of the other kind of cumulative impacts, risks, environmental justice concerns, hazards, et cetera, around the facility itself, and then also around climate change, sea level rise, and the transportation risks with both train and truck being increased with that. And so really, putting it from the perspective of it impacting not just, obviously the neighborhood of Washington Park being disproportionately impacted being right there, but the whole city in terms of truck and rail lines really traveling throughout the city and being impacted. So much more to come. It's something I'm sure will be something we can talk about more at future points. But if anyone has any questions about the letter, what we included, what we didn't include, or what we want to talk about on this particular project in the future, we can raise those questions now, and then let's kind of dig in more in future.
Any questions or comments? We sent that around. If folks are interested in this being added to another agenda, could you just put your hand up or just shoot me an email so I make sure I add it to the agenda for next time? No pressure. Cool.
Well, definitely interested in this staying on our radar and future agendas. And thank you, Julian and Sue, for sending that letter in.
So there's one other agenda item.
Oh, did I miss something? Shoot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's the annual report. Shoot.
Yeah, so I don't know if folks have, if we have time for this today, but we do need to wrap up on that annual report and submit it to council. So perhaps you can just, if you have, hopefully have a chance to review it, send me any comments or feedback on it. Otherwise, maybe we'll just plan on submitting that at the end of the week. That's fine.
Does that work for everyone? Can folks confirm that I sent it, so you guys should have it. I can resend it.
Is this the one that's it's like a bulleted list under kind of accomplishments under different kind of categories and topics? Is there going to be a letter that goes along with it in terms of kind of framing what it would,
That's a good point. I think in the past, the chair and co-chair have submitted a letter as well saying any highlights and then priorities going forward as well.
Oh yeah. Shoot.
We're also, well into 2021. So I think the letter could be pretty simple.
Okay. I'm happy to draft a letter and send it out to the task force for you guys to review over the next few days. I think one thing it could highlight is we are about to go into the next fiscal year, and we heard about the increases in the sustainability office's budget, or the codification of this, all the things Leah mentioned earlier. We could show support for that, in addition to them talking about the activities that have happened over the last year. But if folks would prefer, if the report gets sent and we send a letter separately after you guys have had a chance to review and we've discussed a meeting, whatever works for other task force members or commission members, I'm fine with. With everything that was happening, all of the updates I sent, it was like, whew, this was a lot. And I totally didn't even think of the letters. That is completely my bad.
No worries.
Any preferences folks have? Like different options? I write a letter now and send it to you for your quick review. You send comments into Leah by the end of the week, or you send comments into Leah by the end of the week, and I send you a letter, but we talk about it in June.
I'm fine with you just drafting a letter and sending it to us for comments. Is that one of the options?
Mm-hmm.
Not talking about it next time.
Cool. Okay, great. So I'll send it BCC, so we're not having an offline meeting like I do, and I'll send that around as soon as possible. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, I know we don't have to do a motion, but I know Jesus already left, but we can do a little motion like they did on a prior meeting. And everybody, I hope you have a lovely, lovely evening. And thank you so much for a great meeting.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Angela and Lauren.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.